This is chapter 13 of The Guardian of Ailos. Mina hung around to make sure the kids went to sleep. She knew that wherever she had to go, it would be too risky with a whole party. Her memory remained fractured from the torture, but she figured she could piece it all together as she went. The worms brought her to the dungeons here in Pirnos. Of that she was sure. She remembered that horrid place all too well. She also remembered the forest filled with dead knights, her destination for the night. It lay somewhere between the cave and the mountain's keep, so she had her heading. As soon as Nelson lay down, Mina pulled her cloak up and over her face to keep the ash away, headed down into the valley and then into the midnight forest. As the dying sun faded behind the black horizon, Mina found herself baptized in darkness. The burnt trees moved like shadows in the breeze. Ash stung her eyes. Her feet kept searching for a path, but the ancient road that once passed through that place had long been covered. Every once in a while, she'd locate a stray cobblestone off to her right or left, which helped her stay the course, but with her eyes constantly squinting and the trees camouflaged in soot, eventually she'd wander off again. Then, when she found herself at the edge of patience, she saw it. A haunting sight. It was a sound that drew her attention first, the sound of rushing wind from beating wings, then a loud roar, forcing her to her knees. It shook the earth and all her courage with it. Ailos. Mina hurried over to the nearest tree and knelt down. The forest provided sufficient coverage, but it also proved difficult to see through. She strained her eyes in the dusk and fixed her gaze to the tip of the horrid mountain. The sound of rushing wind grew louder. Then the shadow of the beast consumed the forest. Mina threw her back against the tree, hoping to remove any separation. She pulled her cloak tight around her as she sat motionless in the dark. After the shadow passed, she traced it with her eye to the top of the mountain, where, for the first time, she saw his haunting shape. That of a dragon, yes, but larger than she thought. His wings spanned 100 feet at least, and his height towered above the trees. Mina felt her heart fall inside her chest. Her short, steady pant became long, slow, drawn-out breaths. At first, it felt like the sight of the dragon had stolen her breath, but she knew it was merely her confidence. Confidence, she thought. A curious idea. Was it confidence that made her leave her only daughter and loving husband? Wasn't it confidence that led her to lose her locket in the first place? She thought back to the days without it. Without them. Strange how being separated from it made it so easy for her enemies to defeat her, to destroy her memory. Before the night she left, she couldn't remember a day without it. Its power and its light always guiding her. No wonder the darkness overcame her. Everything she once knew had been lost, until... Mina chuckled. That crazy Sid. It was Sid that led her back to the locket. Sid that helped piece her mind back together. But still, something inside of her, even then, felt torn. Two parts of her warring against the other. One comforted and encouraged by the warmth of the light inside of her, ready to fight at all costs. The other darkened by fear and shame, causing doubt to quench her. Make her be with us, she prayed in a whisper, her eyes closed. And at the sound of her prayer, she felt a warmth grow inside of her. The light had not abandoned her. She could feel it. She still had access to its power. Mina waited until finally the shadow of the dragon dipped beyond the trees. "Thank you," she prayed, then stood up and dusted her cloak off. She didn't have much time. The demon dog that took the third stone wouldn't be far behind. The corrupted stone acted like a magnet to the golden door. Young Nelson knew that well. And Mina knew that they had eyes on the seaside gate. That's how they found the kids the first time. She walked on. Within a few moments, she started to recognize her surroundings. The trees started to show signs of life. Their leaves, although sparse at first, were bright green. Little by little, the ground also started to change. The earth softened under her boots, a nice change from the scorched, dry land of the midnight forest. Still, she kept a close eye on each step, not wanting to alert any possible soldiers. She walked on. Then, Mina noticed the air shift as well. It thickened with moisture. When she blinked, she felt her eyelids stick for just a fraction longer than usual. Unfortunately, the air did not cool, but the shift in climate told her she was getting close. At last, she found her way to a final cluster of trees on the edge of a large clearing. The light inside of her pulsed, its force urging her to stop. Mina paused. The remains of both beauty and death lay before her. As she passed through the last row of trees, she couldn't help but notice the poetry of it all. Pieces of armor left, strewn all about, a memorial to the fallen. Waves of mossy grass blanketed helmets and breastplates and shields, a reminder that one day the earth would have her too. She searched the area for weapons. She grabbed a dagger, a shield, a short sword, and a pair of hand axes. The dagger and shield for Nelson, the short sword for Sid, and the axes would be good for more than just a battle. They made great tools for building fires and making traps. After tucking them into her belt and throwing the shield over her back, she made her way back toward the forest. Then the nightmare began. "Oi!" a deep and grisly voice shouted. "Where do you think you're going?" Mina stopped, then turned with her hands up. On the other side of the clearing, she saw the black silhouette of a giant hound. "A drake," Mina whispered to herself. "Of course." The large beast stalked forward. "You're not supposed to be here," it growled. "I was actually just leaving," Mina replied, trying to buy some time. She needed a plan. "Is that right?" he asked, sniffing the air. The hound-like creature prowled closer. Mina watched him carefully as he stalked from side to side, the hilt of her sword inviting her right hand. "If you know who I am, then you know that I've escaped this forsaken place before." The drake laughed. "Is that how you remember it?" he asked, leaping over a fallen tree trunk. Mina got a good look at her pursuer. He looked older, but not so much that it made him look weak. No, the drake had but seen plenty of battle and stood all the more stronger because of it. The aged face and scarred right eye confirmed Mina's suspicion. A mane of gray adorned his neck and traced his spine halfway to his tail. Like most drakes, heavy shield-like scales covered its chest and belly. This one's were white. Mina made sure to take note of the three most threatening parts: the tail, which had a tip of barbs, the feet, which had deadly claws, each one larger than her own hand, and of course, its teeth. One bite and a load of bacteria would be injected into her. The sickness that followed would be worse than the bite itself. "Oh dear, you give yourself so much credit," he shook his head. "You put up a good fight, you did. But the Master's eye never lost sight of you." Mina minded her distance and took a complete hold on the sword at her side. She didn't want to initiate just yet. There was sure to be more than one rogue watchman. If she attacked right away, she could be walking into an ambush. Besides, nothing the soldier was saying came as a surprise. She knew they had followed her to Ailos. She defeated them there as well. She also knew that he didn't know the whole truth, or at least he wasn't willing to admit it. Her escape wasn't just a good fight. She threw down 20 of the dragon's soldiers, men, drakes, worms alike. Their only hope was to retreat and follow at a distance, waiting for... No, she whispered. The drake took one last step and then smiled. He knew she figured it out. That's right, dearie. We found more than enough from your memories. And now, you aren't the only one with a locket, are you? Slobber dripped from his smug face. They found their way back. Mina drew her sword. Oh, come now, the drake said. No need to go and get all worked up. Come with me, and I promise, your precious children will be fine. Mina refused to believe that. She shook her head and closed her eyes, reaching far into her heart. With a deep breath, she summoned light from within. She whispered a phrase in Ailethian. A pulse of light and wind shot out from her core. Mina felt the words leave her. She could only hope that Sid and Nelson would hear them. More importantly, that they would understand what it meant. A message to leave, to run, to go back. Her eyes opened, burning with the light inside of her. That night, live or die, she would do whatever it took to protect Sid. She stood in a fighter's stance and dug her heels into the earth, summoning the light within her. The drake nodded. If a fight is what you want, a fight you'll get. A low rumble brewed in his chest until finally he raised his head and roared. The whole clearing shook. Even the worms and centipedes at Mina's feet retreated into the mud. There was a moment of silence as 2 more drakes appeared through the trees. Mina's eyes widened, trying to expand her peripheral vision. Patiently she waited, trying to control her breathing. With one last deep breath, Mina summoned as much light as possible. It wouldn't last long, but it was the only chance she had. She let it fill her veins, her lungs, her heart, until her whole body started to glow. Then, all at once, the drakes pounced. Thanks for listening to Chapter 13 of The Guardian of Ailos. As a reminder, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment or head over to our Substack and follow us there. And we'll be right back next week with Chapter 14.